Valentine's Day is, for many, the ultimate symbol of love. Flowers, candlelit dinners, whispered promises, and hearts beating in sync. But what few know is that behind all this romantic facade lie dark, real, and disturbing stories that show what happens when love crosses the line and turns into something monstrous. Today, you will discover the most chilling and true Valentine's Day cases. Stories where passion became obsession, jealousy turned into a death sentence, and the day meant to celebrate love was stained with blood. These are accounts that shocked the world. Murders committed by rejected lovers, stalkings that ended in tragedy, promises of eternal love that ended in screams and silence. And the scariest part is realizing that in all these cases, the signs were there. Threatening messages ignored, restraining orders disrespected, cold stares foreshadowing what was to come. Each of these true stories reveals the darkest side of the human heart, where the desire to possess someone mixes with madness and destruction. And if you think you've seen it all, wait until the end, because the last revelation in this video will leave you completely breathless. Before we begin, I want to ask you something important. Subscribe to the channel and leave your like right now. It may seem like a simple click, but for YouTube, it makes all the difference. It keeps the channel alive, helps the video reach more people, and motivates us to continue bringing real, mysterious, and tension-filled stories like this one. Here, every week is a dive into the hidden side of reality, into stories most would rather forget, but that you will hear until the very end. And speaking of the end, pay close attention, because tonight's last case hides a detail no one expected. Something so cruel, so real, it will change the way you see love forever. So, turn off the lights, put on your headphones, and get ready. These are the true Valentine's Day horror stories, tales where love stopped being a feeling and became a curse. It was supposed to be just a temporary job, a simple cleaning shift at the Boots pharmacy while she saved money to buy a car. But everything changed the day she met Martin, a much older man, with a heavy gaze and a smile that tried to hide something unsettling. At first, he seemed merely lonely, perhaps a little needy for attention. He offered her a drink after work, insisting on paying, insisting on talking, insisting on existing a little more than he should in her life. She believed she could just be polite, that there was no harm in being kind. But kindness for certain types of people is the same as permission. From that day on, Martin began to stalk her like a shadow that cannot be shaken off. He appeared at the most unexpected times, even on her days off, just to say hi. He sent messages in the middle of the night, called incessantly, and filled the air with that suffocating kind of presence that turns any place into an invisible trap. What once seemed like a work friendship quickly became an emotional prison. When she finally tried to set boundaries, Martin reacted as if he had been betrayed. Sweet words gave way to desperate pleas, and the pleas turned into sickening declarations of love. He claimed they were soulmates, that the universe had brought them together, that nothing, not even her own will, could separate them. The tension escalated until it became unbearable. The job, once a simple routine, turned into a minefield. He watched her, followed her every move, and when the manager prevented him from showing up outside of work hours, Martin began lurking outside, watching the windows, waiting for a wave that would never come. Exhausted and afraid, she decided to quit. But Martin would not accept rejection. On Valentine's Day, he showed up with a bouquet of red flowers and a frozen smile on his face, as if the gesture could erase all the refusals, all the no's she had ever given him. She refused the flowers and turned away, not knowing that this would be the last day of her life. Later, when she returned home, she felt a strange shiver, the sense of being watched. When she went out to get the mail, she saw him there, standing on the sidewalk, motionless, with that same gaze as before, only now empty, dark. He shouldn't have known where she lived. He couldn't be there, but he was. When she screamed for him to leave and slammed the door, she thought she had gotten rid of him. She didn't know the worst was yet to come. That night, while returning home after her last work shift, the silence of the park seemed to swallow the sound of her steps. It was then that she saw him emerging from behind a tree holding a crumpled piece of paper, a love letter, or perhaps a confession. His words came out shaky, at times passionate, at times threatening. She tried to reason, tried to walk away, but Martin was already completely consumed by madness. When he realized he couldn't convince her, his gaze changed. "If you're not mine, you won't be anyone else's." The last words she heard were whispered, like a promise. After that, the park returned to silence. The next morning, a couple of walkers found her body. Around it, pieces of a torn letter, red petals, and the remains of a love that never existed. The case shocked the country. The young woman was Heather Jordan, and Martin Corns, the man who claimed to love her, confessed to following, harassing, and ultimately strangling her in an attack fueled by jealousy and rejection. In court, prosecutors described his obsession as a twisted love that turned into monstrosity. The verdict was clear: life imprisonment. But for Heather, the sentence came earlier, in the last breaths she took, alone in a park, on a Valentine's Day that should never have been remembered. There were more than 2,000 messages, 2,000 desperate attempts to keep alive an illusion that had already died. Every phone buzz, every vibration in her pocket was a reminder that Martin Corns would not accept the end. He wrote at midnight, in the morning, in the middle of work. Words of love, pleas, promises, threats. "You don't understand, Heather. We are one." The obsession began almost imperceptibly, hidden beneath trivial gestures. A kindness here, a compliment there, a look that lingered seconds too long. Heather Jordan tried to ignore it. She tried to believe it was just the friendliness of a lonely colleague. But Martin didn't want friendship. He wanted possession. When she finally decided to put an end to contact outside of work, the man lost the little control he had been pretending to have. He began to follow her like a living shadow. He waited for her at the exit of the Boots Pharmacy, appeared in places he couldn't possibly have known she would be, and watched her from a distance with a gaze that mixed adoration and anger. Heather told her friends, her mother, her colleagues. Everyone told her to report him to protect herself, and she planned to, but she didn't have time. On Valentine's Day 2008, Martin appeared again. He carried red flowers and a crumpled note he called proof of love. Heather refused the gift and tried to walk away, tired and frightened. He watched her leave, but in that moment something inside him broke. Blind love turned into absolute rage. That night, Heather left home for another cleaning shift, unaware that Martin was lurking, hidden in the shadows of a nearby park. As she passed, he silently followed her, his steps almost in sync with hers. What happened next was swift, brutal, and senseless. He grabbed her, tried to make her listen. She screamed, resisted, pleaded, but Martin heard nothing anymore. The hands that once wrote messages of love had become instruments of destruction. When silence finally fell, there was only the sound of the wind and Heather's lifeless body, surrounded by pieces of a torn note, a love letter turned epitaph. The crime shocked the community. The park where her body was found became a place of mourning and fear. Newspapers described Martin as an ordinary man, a middle-aged worker incapable of dealing with rejection. But the details revealed something far darker. He had monitored her schedule, followed her routes, studied her movements. The murder was not an impulse. It was a stalking that lasted months, fueled by delusions and wounded ego. During the trial, Martin remained impassive. No remorse, only that cold, distant gaze, as if he still believed destiny had united them. The prosecution described his behavior as a pattern of relentless harassment culminating in an inevitable act of violence. The messages were presented as evidence. Thousands of obsessive declarations where love and threat were intertwined. You can try to run, but you cannot erase what we are. The sentence came like a whisper of delayed justice, life imprisonment, with a minimum of 17 years. The judge called him a man consumed by his own insanity, incapable of distinguishing affection from destruction. Heather Jordan was only 34 years old. She wanted to live, work, move forward. But her name ended up etched among the cold statistics of crimes of passion, whereof turns into prison and rejection into a death sentence. And while Martin rots in his cell, the echo of his messages still seems to vibrate, as if the distant sound of a forgotten phone continues to ring, calling for someone who will never answer again. Kathy and Tony were the kind of couple who seemed to have conquered time. Married for over 20 years, known by everyone as the high school sweethearts, they shared a life built on memories, children, and old promises. But love, when left uncared for, rots in silence. and in the void left by years of routine and neglect, something began to emerge, something dangerous. His name was David, Tony's best friend since youth. He was always around, attended family dinners, knew the boys, was part of the household. He was the comfortable presence that gradually became a temptation. When Kathy began confiding in David about the problems in her marriage, she found in him the understanding her husband no longer offered. What started as friendship turned into intimate confessions, glances that lingered too long, hands that touched for a second longer than acceptable. Soon, the secret meetings became routine. Kathy and David met in silence, hidden from the world, while Tony, naive, believed the marriage could still be saved. But secrets always find a way to surface, and the truth, when repressed, usually comes out screaming. One day, Tony discovered the messages. He read each one by one. Vows of love, escape plans, whispered desires. In that moment, something inside him broke. The calm and predictable man gave way to a contained hurricane, ready to explode. He feigned normalcy for days, watching Kathy with empty eyes, analyzing every movement, every breath, until one cold February afternoon, he followed her. She thought she was going to meet David, but Tony trailed silently, his heart pounding with hatred, his hands gripping something hidden under his jacket, a revolver that hadn't been seen since his army days. Kathy barely had time to react when she saw him approaching. David tried to intervene, but Tony was no longer a man. He was a broken mirror reflecting only betrayal and humiliation. "You destroyed everything I had," he shouted, his voice tearing through the air. David tried to calm the situation, to step back, but the sound of the first shot split the world in two. Then came the screams, the chaos, the second shot, and silence. Kathy knelt beside David's bloodied body, her hands shaking, her face covered in horror. Tony, panting, watched the scene as if detached, his gaze lost, empty. "You ruined Valentine's Day," he murmured before pointing the gun at himself. The police arrived an hour later. Tony was alive, but barely. David didn't have the same luck. Kathy, now widow and betrayer, saw love and guilt merge into a single shadow that would never leave her. The case shocked the city. The perfect couple had turned into a spectacle of tragedy and blood. Newspapers called it the Valentine's Day Massacre. Neighbors swore that the following night, they could still hear the echo of the shots and Kathy's sobs reverberating through the empty street. In court, Tony showed no remorse. He said he remembered nothing, that love had blinded him. He was convicted, but for Kathy, the true imprisonment began there, inside herself. Every day, when she looked at her children, she saw in their eyes the reflection of the man who destroyed and the friend who betrayed. Valentine's Day was never the same again. For her, love had become a grave, and every heartbeat sounded like a cruel reminder that sometimes love doesn't die. It kills, slowly, until nothing remains but regret and silence. It was Valentine's Day 2007 when love in the Riley household turned into something monstrous. Kathy Riley had finally mustered the courage to tell her husband Tony that she wanted a divorce. The marriage had long been nothing more than an empty shell of broken promises, and Kathy could no longer bear living under the same roof with a man who had become cold, controlling, and unpredictable. What she did not expect was that this simple decision would ignite the fuse of a tragedy. Behind his tired face and constant silence, Tony hid a jealousy that grew like an infected wound. He knew, or at least suspected, that there was another man. And he was right. Kathy had fallen in love with David Glenn Nichols, a family friend, someone kind, someone who made her feel alive again. The affair, until then secret, was the spark Tony needed to lose the little sanity he had left. On Valentine's morning, he watched her in silence, his eyes cold, almost empty, as she packed her suitcase. Kathy believed she could leave without violence, that love had died, but reason could still survive. She was wrong. Tony followed her every step, pretending calm, until he discovered where David lived. In the afternoon, he grabbed his gun, an old pistol he kept hidden, and drove to his rival's house, his heart beating in a strange rhythm, caught between desperation and rage. He knocked on the door. David opened it, surprised, with no time to react. Tony's gaze was that of a man who had already decided the fate of everyone there. "You destroyed my family," he whispered before the first shot echoed through the air. The sound of the gunshot shattered the neighborhood's silence, and in seconds, Kathy's forbidden love spilled into blood on the floor. David fell without even understanding what had happened, and Tony stood there staring at the body as if the world had stopped spinning. When the police arrived, he had locked himself inside the house. The standoff lasted hours. Inside, Tony spoke to himself, muttering disconnected words about love, betrayal, and forgiveness. Outside, officers surrounded him, fearing he might turn the gun on himself. Kathy, devastated, watched from a distance, her face covered in tears and horror. The man with whom she had shared half her life was now a killer, and the house where she had known laughter and birthdays had become the stage for a tragedy that would haunt her forever. When Tony finally surrendered, he walked like a ghost, calm, with empty eyes, as if already dead inside. He said only, "She left me, and he took everything." He was convicted of murder and sentenced to life imprisonment, but no trial could restore what was lost that day. Kathy lived haunted by the sound of the shots, the memories of David and Tony's eyes that seemed to beg for something she could never give again: love. Kathy Riley's story spread through the newspapers as a dark parable of what jealousy and obsession can do to a human mind. Valentine's Day, which for many is synonymous with flowers and promises, became for her the eternal reminder that love, when twisted by the fear of loss, can turn into the cruelest of prisons. To this day, locals say the house where it all happened remains empty, the windows always shut, and that on February nights it is possible to hear the echo of a muffled scream, followed by a shot, the sound frozen in time from the moment Kathy Riley's love died forever. She met him at a time when everything seemed simpler, when love fit into messages exchanged online and carefully crafted profiles on sites like MySpace. His name was Ryan, or at least that's what he claimed, a charismatic, attentive man, full of sweet words and a smile that seemed to hide something, but which she, blinded by charm, chose to ignore. At first, he was everything she had ever wanted: present, protective, passionate. He sent flowers, left notes, said she was the reason for his life. But little by little, the romance turned suffocating. The messages became demands, the unexpected visits a routine. He began controlling what she wore, who she spoke to, where she went, and when she tried to assert herself, the sweet tone vanished, replaced by a cold, unpredictable rage. Love became a prison built of fear. After a year of threats and manipulation, she managed to end it. She changed her number, blocked him on social media, warned friends and family. But Ryan did not accept the end. He appeared in random places, at her work parking lot, in front of her parents' house, sitting in his car, just watching. She reported him. She obtained a restraining order. She thought she would be safe now. But his silence in the following weeks was more terrifying than the stalking. It was the kind of calm that precedes the storm. On the night of February 14, Valentine's Day, she decided to stay home. She closed the curtains, locked all the doors, and tried to distract herself by watching a movie. It rained outside, and the sound of water hitting the window brought her a strange sense of isolation. Around 11 at night, the noise began. Slow, almost imperceptible footsteps coming from the backyard. Her heart raced. She picked up the phone, but there was no signal. When the kitchen window glass shattered, her scream got stuck in her throat. He was there. Wet from the rain, eyes fixed on her, a twisted smile on his lips. "You thought you could leave me?" he whispered, advancing with a knife in his hand. She ran, stumbling over furniture, trying to reach the front door, but he grabbed her by the hair and threw her to the floor. The blade gleamed under the dim light of the room. "You are mine," he repeated, each word filled with hatred and madness. She fought with all her strength, managing to hit him with a lamp, enough to make him stagger. She ran up the stairs, locked herself in the bedroom, and called the police with trembling hands. On the other side of the door, he laughed, tapping the knife against the wood rhythmically, as if counting down to her death. "Happy Valentine's Day, my love," he said before trying to break down the door. The sirens drew closer, but time seemed to drag. When the police finally stormed the house, they found him unconscious on the floor after she had defended herself with a pair of scissors. She was taken to the hospital, covered in blood, her gaze distant, repeating only, "I told you he would come back." The case shocked the city. The man, who had ignored the restraining order, left behind a trail of messages, diaries, and meticulously planned revenge schemes. They discovered he had bought the knife days before and waited for that exact night, the date meant to celebrate love, to turn the end of the relationship into a spectacle of horror. Since then, her house remains empty, a symbol of fear and survival. Neighbors say that on rainy February nights, you can still hear the sound of the knife scraping the wood and the whisper of a voice too passionate to be human. Because Ryan's love never ended, it merely transformed into something that not even death seems to have silenced. Tiana Notice was only 25 years old when the love she once believed would be the start of a new life turned into a death sentence. Young, studious, and full of dreams, she thought James Carter Seck was the kind of man anyone would want by their side. Attentive, intelligent, caring. But behind his smile, there was something dark, a silent control that infiltrated every aspect of her life. At first, it was just jealousy disguised as concern. Questions about who she was seeing, constant messages, calls deep into the night. Then came the subtle threats, insults masked as love, the fear that settled every time she tried to pull away. When Tiana finally found the courage to end things, she thought she was free. But James would not accept the end. He began following her, sending disturbing emails, leaving her with the feeling of always being watched. Every time she left the house, she felt the weight of his gaze, even without seeing him. She sought help. She reported him. She obtained a protective order. But the paper meant to protect her was far too fragile against the obsession of a man determined to destroy everything he could not control. Tiana sent desperate messages to the police, reporting the threats she received. "He's going to kill me," she wrote just days before her death. No one acted in time. On the night of February 14, 2009, Valentine's Day, the date that should have symbolized love and hope became a ritual of horror. Rain fell lightly on the parking lot of the building where she lived, and Tiana had just arrived home. As she searched for her keys, she felt a shiver down her neck, that feeling that something was wrong. When she turned around, he was there. James emerged from the shadows, his eyes empty and a metallic glint in his hands. There was no time to scream. He lunged, rage exploding with every stab of the knife, murmuring twisted words of love, promises that now sounded like curses. The neighbors heard the noise, but the attack was swift, brutal, and final. Tiana fell, bloodied, her eyes staring at the dark sky. When the paramedics arrived, it was already too late. James fled, but was captured days later. During interrogation, he displayed a mix of calm and pride, as if he believed he had done what was necessary. He said Tiana had provoked him, that he loved her too much to let her live without him. These words chilled the blood of everyone who heard them. The trial was swift, and James Carter II was convicted, but the pain he left behind could not be ended with a sentence. Tiana's death sparked national outrage. How could a woman who had done everything right, reported him, sought help, obtained protection, still die at the hands of the one who claimed to love her? Her story exposed cruel flaws in the justice system and led to the creation of new laws and protocols regarding domestic violence and enforcement of restraining orders, aiming to ensure what happened to her would never happen again. But for those who lived through that horror, the reforms came too late. Friends and family say Tiana's apartment remained empty for months, untouched, with wilted flowers and books stacked on the table as if she might return at any moment. Neighbors report that on February nights, especially on Valentine's Day, the distant sound of footsteps in the parking lot can still be heard, followed by a muffled scream carried by the wind. It is the echo of a true story, a cruel reminder that love, when tainted by obsession and possession, can turn into something darker than death itself. Today, Tiana Notice's name is remembered as a symbol of resistance and warning, a voice that was silenced, but whose echo continues to scream against the horror that arises when passion becomes an act of destruction. The video begins with an unsettling silence, broken only by slow beats, like the sound of a heart sensing its end. It tells three true Valentine's Day stories. Three loves that began with promises and ended in screams, blood, and silence. Three lives destroyed by obsession, jealousy, and the disregard of signs that were always there in plain sight. The first story is Heather's, a kind young woman who only wanted to work but became the target of an older colleague's obsession. He followed her, sent messages, and turned her everyday life into a constant nightmare. She tried to ignore him, then confronted him and eventually ran. But the sick love he believed he felt could not accept rejection. On Valentine's Day, he waited outside in the cold, and when she passed, he attacked her. What began as workplace flirting ended with her life slipping away on the floor of a park. The sound of the wind mingled with her final breaths, a reminder that love can be as lethal as any weapon when born from possession. The second story is about Kathy, a married woman who thought she had rediscovered passion in the arms of her husband's best friend. The love triangle became a ticking time bomb, and when the secret came out, her husband Tony lost control. On Valentine's Day, he decided to settle everything. With a gun in hand and his heart in ruins, he confronted his wife's lover. The encounter ended in screams and gunfire. Blood spread across the cold floor, and Kathy, covered in horror, realized that love and guilt were now tied together forever. The date meant to symbolize union had become a mark of destruction. The third story is the most disturbing. Tiana, a 25-year-old woman, believed she was finally free from an abusive relationship. She obtained a restraining order, reported him, and tried to move on. But the man who claimed to love her would not accept the end. On Valentine's night, he waited outside her house, hidden in the darkness. When she arrived, he lunged, armed with a knife, and killed her there, under the sound of the rain. Days before, she had told authorities he would kill her, and no one listened. Her death became a symbol of a system's failure to protect those who needed it most. Each of these stories intertwines into a thread of terror that runs through the video like a curse. The love depicted here is not the one of flowers, letters, and candlelit dinners. It is distorted love, corroded by the need for control, the denial of an ending, the refusal to accept that the other is free to leave. The faces of the victims appear among shadows and the sound of heartbeats, while the narration describes the moment passion turned into hatred. What all these stories have in common is the ignored warning, the email no one replied to, the muffled scream behind the door, the threat that seemed like an exaggeration. The video ends with a phrase that freezes the air. Love doesn't kill, but those who confuse love with possession do. Then the sound of a ringing phone echoes in the darkness, followed by absolute silence. A cold reminder that behind romantic dates and red flowers, there are hearts that stopped beating because they believed they were loving. For them, Valentine's Day became the day love revealed its cruelest face, leaving behind echoes that still whisper, asking to be remembered. And so we reach the end of another dive into the darkest side of Valentine's Day with true Valentine's Day horror stories. True stories of obsession, jealousy, and violence that remind us that not all love is pure, and that behind flowers and hearts, some passions can turn into deadly traps. If you were scared, surprised, or simply shocked by what you heard, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave a like. These simple actions help YouTube show our videos to more people and allow us to continue bringing real, mysterious, and chilling stories like these. If you want to support the channel even more financially, consider sending a super thanks. Every contribution makes a huge difference, helping us invest in more quality content. But if you can't, that's okay too. Leave a comment about what you thought of the video, which story scared you the most, or if you've ever experienced something similar. We love reading every message and knowing that you're part of the community. And before you go, don't leave just yet. Another video will appear on the screen that's even more intriguing and captivating than this one. A new story of horror and mystery that will hold your attention from start to finish. Click now and keep watching, because real terror never ends, and the next case could be even more shocking